morning. Today, I want to talk about the impact of COVID on the mental health and well being of children and adolescents. I came across this really awesome study because I've been so curious. To me, one of the most important things that we need to think about when we're working with children and adolescents is how do we build resiliency? I really think that's an important focus to think about what do your clients need in order to develop resiliency. And one of the things that I always say to parents is, and I thought this way when I was raising my own children, which is life is challenging. Now, granted, the COVID pandemic was extremely challenging, and we know that life is challenging. That's the way it is. And there are some things that we can do to mitigate some of that. And everyone experiences challenges at some point in their life. We know this is a fact of life. So, how do we teach children resiliency? How do we help them have resiliency? And that's always been an important focus for me. And so when I was looking through what the research was saying about the pandemic and its impact on children, one of the things I thought would be important is to look at what are some of the protective factors? What are some of the things that helped children fare a little better through the pandemic than maybe other children? So when I found this research that was published in 2021, I thought it was really, really helpful because it identified what risk factors are. It also identified some protective factors. And as child and adolescent therapists, as play therapists, expressive arts therapists, working with children, adolescents, and families, I think it's important to take a look at what the research says to help guide us through the treatment planning and treatment decision-making process. So that's what I want to talk about today. If you are watching, please go ahead and post your name in the comments. I'd love to see who's here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the matter. What are you finding in your clinical work with children and adolescents and their families? So go ahead and post your name in the comments, post where you're from, what population you work with, what setting you work in, and we will go ahead and get started. So I'm Kathy Spooner. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapist supervisor here in the United States with 30 years experience. And I am a huge fan of using play therapy and expressive arts to help children and adolescents in the healing process, to help them develop that resiliency that's going to be important for them throughout their lives. I think of resiliency as their way to bounce back when things get challenging. So there was a study done in 2019 by two researchers in Israel. And in September of 2019, the Ministry of Education there were several kind of assessments that were given to the children and completed children and their parents because they wanted to explore the mental health and well-being of the children in Israel. So that happened prior to the pandemic. And then it gave them a really good opportunity when the pandemic hit, because they had already started, it gave them an opportunity then to really take a look at the risk and protective factors for children. And they found some really interesting things and some things that if you are working with children and adolescents, we know this to be true. And so what we know to be true is connection, helpful, positive, secure attachments create the foundation for developing resiliency. So some of the things that they found were, and if you've been working with children, you know this to be true. There was an increase in anxiety, depression, and panic across the board. There was an increase across the board. And what they found when they did the interest in instruments, I can't say the word, when they said gave out the interest instruments again in May of 2020, it was after a 2-month lockdown period, similar to what we experienced here in the United States. The state that I live in, the schools were shut down. Children were at home. We were in lockdown for over a year. Um, and so here they were looking at the impact of lockdown over 2 months. And what they found was that that children who already had some mental health challenges, their their symptoms were much more severe. So if their baseline was that they had mental health challenges, after only a 2-month lockdown, their anxiety, depression, and panic, suicide ideation significantly increased. Some of the things that I thought was interesting, what they found was there was also a decrease in social media use, which I found interesting. They found that so there was a decrease in positive emotions, decrease in life satisfaction, and a decrease in social media use, and their peer support. So we kind of knew most of those were um, already the case, because if you've been reading and listening, we're probably kind of aware those things had happened during the pandemic. And what they found was also there were increases in video game use, and internet and TV screen time, which kind of makes sense because there wasn't really anything to do if you're not allowed to leave your home. So in this study, what the population size was a little over 1,500 students, and through that they identified some of the risk factors. One of the I forgot to put up my my little banner here. Some of the risk factors I mentioned were if students were already experiencing mental health challenges, then the impact of the COVID-19 and the lockdown on their mental health and well-being, they experience much more distress. So their symptoms severity significantly increased. So then they also looked at protective factors. So why was it some kids seemed to fare better through that pandemic than other children? And what they found was children who had access to social support, and the other one makes sense when you think about it, is a daily routine. So children who had social supports, so people in their adults in their lives, as well as maybe some peer support, and their routines were not dramatically disrupted during this very extended period of time, then they tended to do better. So what does that tell us? That tells us that structure and flexibility are important to children. We knew that. And it also, the point that the study was kind of making is through an extended period of chronic stress, the ability for children to be able to access healthy support systems and maintain a semblance of routine. I always add in there flexibility because we don't want things to be really rigid. We want that balance between structure and flexibility. We also know that the relationships and the quality of the relationships for children is critical for helping them to develop those resiliency skills. And we know that to be true from a lot of the attachment studies over the last several decades. We know that children's ability to access their parents and for their parents to be able to, or caregivers, to be able to effectively co-regulate their distress and to help them feel a sense of safety and security will decrease some of the negative impact. And so how, in my mind, how do we use that data? First and foremost, it was really, I think, really important to have that data so that we could have an idea of what do our children need now. I don't know about you, what I'm finding and what I'm hearing, because I interact with a lot of school professionals as well. What I'm hearing is that kids are really, really struggling. I know here in Nevada, where I live, the suicide rate, Clark County, which is Las Vegas County, is the biggest county. Like outside, I always say outside of Las Vegas, there's a whole lot of rural towns in between the southern Nevada and northern Nevada. And what they found was the anxiety, depression, suicide ideation, panic symptoms dramatically increased. And what I'm also hearing, and I'd be curious what you're hearing in your communities, what we're also hearing is children coming back to school, their behavior problems were significantly increased. Their cranky, irritable, and outright mean behavior towards each other was significantly increased. And their rude and disrespectful behavior, not all children, but from previous, regular kind of school things, it had dramatically increased. Um, and disrespectful behavior towards teachers had significantly increased. And I think that makes sense when you think about it, because we know when we're feeling miserable, when we're not feeling safe, when the world feels like it has fallen apart, when children have been asked to wear masks so they don't kill other people. I'm not anti-mask, I'm not pro-mask. What I'm saying is, if we look at things from a child's point of view, right, wrong, or indifferent about masks, if we look at it from a child's point of view, for about 2 years, they were told they had to wear masks. Everybody had to wear masks or people would die. So when we move, what is the message? And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying this is the reality of what we went through globally and the impact of children. This was really, really scary and overwhelming for them. And so now we're kind of post, I don't know if we are post pandemic. I know a lot of the restrictions are loosening, so I'll say that. So now what we're finding is some children are terrified to take off their masks. I do have some clients who are really afraid to take off their masks because they're afraid they might make somebody sick or somebody might make them sick. So how do we help children and how do we help families? To me, that's the question. What do we do with the data and how do we help children and their families move forward? And so the protective factors are connection, 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 and structure and flexibility. So how do we increase access to that for children? And what we know is the children who are already struggling with mental health problems, they were hit even harder. So how do we help those families? How do we help those children who are already struggling in order to develop some of that resiliency, to strengthen those relationships, to add back a sense of safety and security through structure and flexibility? And in my mind, that means as play therapists, as child and adolescent therapists, we really need to get families involved in the treatment process. We need parents involved in the treatment process. And I am a huge fan of family play therapy. Getting the family into the therapy sessions gives you an opportunity to see those relationship dynamics, those interaction patterns, their ability to communicate, their ability to resolve conflict, to problem solve, to work together. How do they manage getting on each other's nerves? And then how do they go back and do that repair work? Even sibling relationships. I really think in the play therapy arena, because I'm a registered play therapist supervisor, so I know the power of using play therapy with children and adolescents and integrating in expressive arts into the treatment process. And I've seen the power of using family play therapy within a family system. And to me, that's something that doesn't get done as much as it needs to get done in the treatment process. I'm not saying that it has to replace individual counseling. What I'm saying is, I really think as play therapists, as child and adolescent therapists, we need to integrate play therapy, families and parents with much more intention into the treatment process because we know COVID has impacted whole families. So to me, it makes sense to integrate in the whole family into the treatment process. And I, years ago, because I am a huge fan of play therapy and family play therapy, I would say my default mode coming out of graduate school back in 1992 um, is family therapy. That was the model I was taught. So when I was finally able to find a way to learn how to do play therapy, because I had been introduced to play therapy when I was teaching children with emotional problems in a special ed self-contained classroom setting. The school social worker did play therapy with my class, and I was part of that group process using play therapy in a group format. And I saw the power of play therapy. And so when I was finally able to find training and a supervisor after I had graduated, which took a few years, um, I I also knew the power of family therapy. And so I began to learn how to use family play therapy. I would say probably one of the forerunners way back in the day is Eliana Gale, and I took her training on family play therapy. I have her books. And I began to use that also with my clients. And it was always amazing to me what dynamics I could see once I got the family in there. So I would usually start out working with individual play therapy, and then I would eventually add the family in. And a lot of the things that I had kind of suspected, but when I met with parents, just in parent sessions, I couldn't really get at it because sometimes you have to go tactfully through things and wait for people to be at their pace, or sometimes they're not aware of it. So even when you ask a question, they're not aware of it, so they don't know how to answer that question. When I would get the whole family in the play therapy room and we would do family play therapy sessions, I would typically have a much better sense of what was going on in the family. And then I could use the therapeutic powers of play to help them change some of those dynamics and strengthen those family relationships. Because I am a firm believer that I am a small dot in the life of my clients. I always try to be a good dot in their life. Like I'm a brief moment in time and I try to have a good impact. The reality is they're with their family, ideally, hopefully, they're with their family the rest of their lives. So, in my mind, if I can integrate the whole family in there, I have the power to have a much greater impact for the life of that child and their family. And then thinking about it in terms of the data we glean from these studies, and this one in particular, we know that a resiliency factor is relationships and structure and flexibility. So integrating families into the play therapy process is going to have a much greater impact for positive treatment outcomes. So to me, that's an important thing that we can do. If you're a play therapist, if you're a child and adolescent therapist, you're working with the family, whether they are in your office or not. The dynamics, the relationship patterns, the values, the belief systems, those are all in there. And so, if we want to strengthen and help our clients develop resiliency, then we need to get the family in there. Or at the very least, if you are not a family therapist, or the thought of having the family in there is just something you're not going to do, at least find a way to integrate parents in a much more intentional way with the child. And I would really still advocate for doing the family play therapy. If you have a model to use that will guide you through the treatment process, your ability to be effective and confident greatly improves. So years ago, I developed, because I wanted some flexibility. And by now when I came up with this model that I had created, which is attachment focused family play therapy, I had already um, I started learning about, this is years ago, attachment theory and neuroscience, and understanding that amazing integration of attachment theory, neuroscience, and family systems theory. And so when I came up with the model, then that's the lens that I think is helpful in order to look through that lens to guide you through the treatment process. Using the therapeutic powers of play helps to integrate in family members of different ages and stages. So that's one of the benefits, to be able to do that. So that's it for today. Takeaways for today is what we found with the study is that children and adolescents through the pandemic across the board experienced increases in anxiety and depression and panic. And for those children who were already experiencing some mental health challenges, their mental health distress significantly increased. And I think what we were finding is there's a lot more suicide ideation, which is kind of an indication of how distressing the situation is for children and adolescents. And so what we found is, with the protective factors, that helping children strengthen their connections. We are relational beings at our core. So it's relationship, 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 relationship. Quality connection, quality connection, quality connection. Having those people in the lives of children that are going to help to create a sense of safety, that are going to help to co-regulate their emotions and help them learn the skills and tools that they need in order to develop resiliency and navigate any of the stressors of life. That's the focus that we need to take. So to me, that's one of the biggest takeaways from this research. So if you are interested, I do actually have a book about my model, Attachment Focused Family Play Therapy. It's published by Routledge. If you're interested in that book, there is a link on my website. The name of the book is called Attachment Focused Family Play Therapy, an Intervention for Children and Adolescents After Trauma. This specific focus for this book is taking a look at the impact of trauma and how you can use attachment-focused family play therapy to help children as part of the treatment milieu. The model itself, attachment-focused family play therapy, can be used for a variety of reasons that your clients are coming to your office. I use it all the time for a variety of mental health challenges. Um, what I like about it is it gives me the flexibility to make sure that I'm fitting the interventions and the focus for the specific needs of my client. The other thing it does is it has a structure for you to teach parents an attachment based parenting model to help them learn to co regulate their children, to navigate behavior problems, to do the repair process. So you're teaching parents how to do this while you're also doing the family play therapy sessions where they can practice some of those skills in there. And then the other part of the model is you meet with families, the whole family do your interventions using play therapy. And then there's a specific and dedicated kind of parent coaching, parent session where you are really helping parents through the treatment process to develop more effective parenting skills using an attachment based parenting model. And so, if you're interested in the book, you can hop over there to my website. Um, and there's a link to the book. It's published by Routledge. And if you're interested, here's another one. This is kind of a save the date. I haven't really put this out yet. There's my website. I do have a training this Saturday. If It's called Attachment Focused Family Play Therapy. If you're interested in learning the model, it's an online training. Full day. There are CEs available for play therapy, and there are social work CEs that are available as well if that's something you need. And then also I do next month in June, at the end of June. I haven't announced this yet, so you guys are the first to hear. I do have an online training. It's 2.5 hours, so it's a short one. How to integrate parents much more effectively into the play therapy process. For me, the study really, really reinforces the idea as child and adolescent therapists, as play therapists. If you're working with children and adolescents in the mental health field, integrating family, integrating parents is going to be critical to help children really overcome the impact that they're experiencing from the pandemic. So if you're interested in more, feel free to send me a message. I'd be happy to get the link to you. If you have questions, I would be happy to answer those. Feel free to message me, and I will see you next time. Bye.